On Sunday the 23rd of July, I had a dream. I had a dream that I was introduced to this baby. As soon as I saw him, I knew he was related to me in some way. I asked him and I said, "Who is your mother?" And he said her name was Toya. When I met Toya, she was into theatre arts. So we began to gather people and we began to train them for what I didn't know at the time. It was a short session with lots of people, but we split them up in groups and they were going through some type of training. After some time, I began to gather them all, and I just felt like it was time to move on to the other side. For some reason, I knew that wherever we were going, that's where we were going to settle, and that the training that we were going through was for that place. So we began running in a group. We were in formation and we were together. We attracted a lot of other people who were also running and going in the same direction, but I don't think they were going to the same destination. As we began running, people started falling off with the strange runners. They got distracted, disorientated, tired, etc. Mind you, some of the runners that joined us were more fit and skilled in running. But again, I don't think their destination was the same as ours. But they were attracted to how we were together and how well we was running in formation and in harmony. I ran ahead to liaise with Toya as I still didn't know where we were going. And as I began speaking with her, I began to hear the cry of some of my runners. As I looked around, I saw a man with chains and keys. He was interrogating my runner, who was in distress, and you could clearly see she was weary. He began to interrogate her and ask her where she was going, and of course, she couldn't answer. She wasn't sure where she was heading to because of the level of weariness and distress that she was going through the journeying to her destination. And because of this, he bound her hands and her feet. He put shackles on her feet and bound her hands behind her back and went on pursuit to his next victims. Now, even though her feet were in shackles and her hands were tied behind her back, she was still moving and trying to head towards her destination, even though she wasn't sure where she was going. After seeing this, I ran over to my runner and asked her what was wrong. As I was approaching her, I saw that her trainers was not on her feet properly. So I fastened her trainers on her feet and demanded the keys from the man that bound her. I realized that the man approached her because her trainers was not fastened onto her feet. I loosed her and she continued running. Now, let's go into the interpretation of the dream. I pray this blesses you and encourages you. The name Toya, the woman who I was introduced to, literally means door into the valley or woman of victory. So remember, she was the person who was trained in theatre arts, and she was the person who was delivering and facilitating the sessions. Now, theatre arts is a place for development of character. And so if Toya, aka the woman of victory, aka the door into the valley, was an expert in performing arts, which is really a place of development of character and process. This means that she was training these people for their next. She was training these people for the promises of God that was over their life. However, they had to go through the training of development of character, and they had to be processed to go into the valley, to come out victorious in order to go into their promised land. Let's look at the example of the Israelites in the book of Exodus. They were on their way to the promised land. However, they had to go through their valley season. And that valley season was when they were in the wilderness. Why? Because they had to be stripped away from the Egyptian culture. Their mindset had to be changed. Their character needed to be developed to be able to occupy the place of the promise. Now, we know Anytime you progress to that next level, anytime you're going to your next, you need to develop something new inside of you in order to occupy effectively. You see, it's not always about the destination, but it's about the journey. This brings me on to the next part of the dream. After the runners, or I would say my runners, went through their process, went through the season of training, and it was now a time to enter into the valley, which is actually the time of journeying. They came across people who are more skilled and may have been running for a very long time. The problem was that they were running in the same direction, but they were not going to the same destination. Many times in our lives, we will come across people who may be heading in the same direction of us, but the promises of us are different. With that being said, it doesn't matter if you have connected or covenanted with somebody who is brilliant than you, more excellent than you, more smarter than you, or have more experience than you. If they are not heading into the destination that God has for you, it will be a waste of your time. Not only that, if they have not been processed and gone through the measures that you have gone through in order to make the journey, in order to go to that promise, you will be unequally yoked, because those who are processed and those who are unprocessed will never be able to journey together effectively. I want to go to the next part of my dream, where it was about the woman who was in distress and who was weary. She was now unsure of her destination because of her weariness. You see, when you go through the season of development and you go through your process where God shows you who He is to you, it's not necessarily for the destination, but it's for the journeying, because the journeying is the most difficult at times. You see, shoes often represents faith and readiness to be of service to God. And so the fact that her shoes was not fastened onto her feet properly, that means she lacked faith. Now, we know that the man that was with the shackles and the keys was an evil spirit. I would call him an enemy of progress. And so I understood that the reason why he stopped her in the first place was because her shoes was not fastened onto her feet already. You see, the enemy can detect your faith meter from afar, because he's the one that wearies you out, according to the book of Daniel. So once he wearies you out, that will then be a catalyst to your faith. This will shake your faith. This will affect your faith. And so when he saw that her trainers was not fastened onto her feet, he knew that her faith was tampered with, because the journey can sometimes weary you out. I will conclude with this. Though the journeying can be the most daunting time to your destination, endure and endure some more, because it's not always about just arriving at your destination, because let's face it, the destination will definitely be a place of rest, but within the journeying, that is the most important thing, because it's the journey that you will help other people with when they are going to set out on their own path of life and heading to their own destination, which is the promises of God over their life. My name is Felicia Roche, and I am the Seer's Diary.